are back. Your boy Tommy D. You know I call myself the nonprofit sector connector, and I tell you on this show, hashtag ending the stigma, that I have questions, but I don't have answers. I really don't have the answers to how we solve this. I believe we must normalize the conversation that recently somebody said, you know, it's okay to not be okay, right? I think we gotta reduce the friction as it relates to resources, get people access to what we need, and by ending the stigma, that stigma around serious mental illness, serious and persistent mental illness, and what I like to say, mental health generally speaking, right? And the stigma around trauma. I become more and more informed the more I have these conversations, but this is a dialogue, it's a conversation, and each week I bring on a new friend, a new colleague, somebody who is going to see the world through their lens. And we ultimately will get to a place where we're having more stronger, more open, more animated conversations in a room full of people saying, let's end this thing together, and that's what it's all about. And it's ending the stigma together. It's not, hey, it'd be cool if we ended the stigma. No, 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 it's an action verb. So with me today, Dr. Jeffrey Reynolds. He's been on Philanthropy in Focus before, never been on this show before, although I think I told you might have been one of the first people I said, I'm gonna do this show, and I got these t-shirts, man, and I think I threatened to give you a t-shirt like 5 times, but I told you before I have it outside for you.
Well, we finally made it happen.
We finally gonna make it happen. I'm glad you're here. You know, CEO, Family and Children's Association, 140-year-old organization, so many programs, 60 some odd programs, I mean, so much good work. Today I really want to zone in on mental health, and mental health as it relates to our young people, our seniors, because your programs really span the age bracket, demographic bracket, all different variables there, but across, all the way across it. But I'd like to hone in on mental health and really how you see mental health generally speaking. We'll get into some of the programs as Family and Children's Association, but I mean, you know, I want to hear your background over at LICAD, because which we'll spell out what that means in a couple minutes, but let's take us a bit on your journey, you know, how you started in the field you're in and now are the CEO of FCA.
So I started working for an organization in Suffolk called VIBES, the Victims Information Bureau of Suffolk County. Still exists under a slightly different banner, but my first job out of college was providing assistance to victims of sex crimes and domestic violence, specifically helping them to get orders of protection, helping them to prepare for trial, that kind of thing.
Why though? How did that even happen as a young person? Like, how do you get interested in doing that type of work?
So I think there's 3 ways that you get into this space, right?
Yeah.
One is that you needed some help and you got it. The other is you needed help and you didn't get it.
Yeah.
You want to make sure people do. And the third way is you didn't have any of those problems, but you looked around and saw a huge amount of need in the community and decided to answer the call. For me, I think it's a little bit of each of those. I grew up in a household where CPS was involved, where there was family violence, where there was a lot of dynamics that weren't healthy. And so, you know, everyone says, well, how'd you fall into Health and Human Services? And generally you say, well, I just kind of fell into it. You know, it seemed like the thing to do.
But then you look back and go,
it doesn't work that way. You don't fall into not making any money and you know, living day to day. And so, you know, the reality is for me, it was a way to make a difference. When I left that job and I went into HIV, that was a little bit different in that I didn't have that personal experience. But I watched in horror as an entire generation of young gay men died of a disease that was completely preventable. As I watched injection drug users in places like North Bellport, where I provided case management, dying of this disease, and it took the president at the time 60,000 fatalities before he said the word AIDS in public. And so for me, it was like—
Talk about stigma, huh?
Right, right. This is so wrong. I have to do something. You know, each time I've done it, it's been this calling. You mentioned LICAD, the Long Island Council on Alcoholism and Drug Dependence. When I went there, I wasn't really looking to make a job change. They said, hey, would you have a conversation? Yeah, I'm happy to have a conversation. What do you guys do? That kind of thing. One of the things they did is they provided planned family interventions for free. And so I'm like, so I don't even know what that is.
Yeah.
And they described it to me, and I'm like, I recently lost my mother to chronic alcoholism, and I'm like, well, wait a minute. So if that had been part of our mix, maybe things would have been different. And this is a calling, right? It was a sign that I needed to get involved, and then I wound up at FCA, which does a little bit of everything. But I've always gotten a huge amount of satisfaction from doing community-based work. I never saw myself doing anything else. I never applied for any jobs in the corporate sector. And I found a home here, and I think one of the reasons that folks like me find homes here is that it's a chance to continuously work through stuff, right? It's also a place where you can take your life's experience and share it with others and feel like, all right, so I can boost up the next person that comes along, the next kid that's struggling under the weight of whatever at home. And you know, frankly, and you know this about me, I recently went through 2 successive cancer diagnoses, which forces you to rethink your life in so many ways. And one of the central questions, I think, for all of us is, have I done a good job? Have I been a good person? Regardless of what you believe happens after. Have I done
Because
my
you
work?
start to really say, this might be it, right? So you have, that's why you start to do
So where is the meaning, right? What did I do in my life that actually had meaning? And you know, as I did that inventory, I'm like, oh, a lot of stuff had meaning.
That's that's really a fortunate. You look back with gratitude, not necessarily that you had the 2 cancer, but that you look back and go, I had that opportunity to really assess and evaluate the impact I'm making.
So the work is fulfilling. I feel like, you know, sometimes, and I've said this to my board of directors, I can't believe this is a job that I get paid for.
That's unbelievable.
Because I get so much from it, and I feel like almost every day I get back more than I give in the way of insights. You know, I think in the helping profession, and this relates directly to the mental health conversation. When somebody comes before you or calls you or knocks on the door for the first time, they've taken an incredible risk in reaching out. And they've probably gone to pick up that phone 6 times before they actually pick up the phone and say, I need help. They've probably driven past the office a half a dozen times and said, no, I'm good, I'm going to be okay. And they always believe that maybe it will get better, and then they ride the roller coaster when it doesn't get better. And so when somebody comes to you, whether it's a friend, whether it's a consumer, and says, I need your help, they're asking for a sacred bond. They're taking the risk of a lifetime, and they might not feel like it because they might be like, well, things can't get any worse. They're taking the risk of a lifetime, and in that exchange between 2 people, that's a sacred bond. That's a sacred thing that happens. It doesn't happen very often in life. Right? Everything is done via text. We pass by a million people on the street. We don't even acknowledge them. We don't look them in the eye. Somebody sitting across from you and saying, I need your help. I don't know what else to do. I need your help. That's a moment of vulnerability. It's a moment that doesn't occur very often. It's a moment that's humbling. Right? You mentioned trauma. I think a lot about our staff and trauma and the vicarious trauma they carry around. Some of the stories they've heard are things that they don't leave your mind overnight. The stuff I hear where I go home and I wake up at 2 a.m. and there it is. And
you know, and you're supposed to, right? Like air quotes, supposed to like move on, right? Like bounce back from that. I had a discussion this morning on my show Philanthropy in Focus, and it was an organization called Cops NY, Metro Cops NY, which is an organization for survivors of a police officer who was lost in the line of duty. And you know, that trauma, I have a friend who has another organization called Post-Tour Processing, and a police officer sees more trauma in a single tour, in a single shift, than a civilian would see in a lifetime. This is stats. This is not Tommy D making stuff up. This is statistics. How are you, and that's why often I ask folks like yourself, you know, when you talk about your staff, that they're seeing this trauma, now maybe not to the level of a law enforcement person, but still, when they're hearing about whether it be child abuse or domestic violence, and you know, and that's another human being that's telling you that story. How did you say that trauma? You said vicarious trauma. And how do you take care of your folks? Meaning, when I say that, your staff. Like, what sort of programming is there for that?
So I don't know that there's any magic formula for making it all go away. I think there are things that hit differently. You know, for a lot of our staff, particularly those who have teenage kids, learning about suicides, learning about overdose fatalities, learning about fentanyl poisonings, because you can see yourself and your children in the eyes of the person who's talking to you. I think those things hit particularly deep. You know, we have an EAP program. You know, we have an external program that folks can go to. We do a lot of team building inside. Ironically, as we're shooting this, I came from an all-staff meeting where we did a training on anxiety, like this morning.
Yeah.
And so unless you do that, people burn out. Unless you do that, people burn out and then internalize that. And if we're all about lifting up the mental health of Long Island, to send a bunch of social workers back out there with unresolved trauma isn't doing the job.
No.
And so we want people to stay in it for the long term. So we encourage people to pace themselves. We encourage people to get that outside help. We encourage folks to talk about it with their peers and to lean on each other.
Yeah.
You know, tonight we're celebrating the anniversary of our recovery center in Hauppauge, 8 years ago we opened it. And on the wall are pictures of folks that were participants at Thrive who lost their battle. And so it's a recovery center. We embrace the notion of recovery. It's for people who have gotten well, but we understand that wellness, whether we're talking about mental health or physical health, isn't always a straight line. And that some people will lose that battle along the way. And so that notion of mental health not being a straight line is really, really important.
Yeah.
Because I think right now we're in a time where there's a lot of chaos in the world. I can't think of a time where there hasn't been, quite frankly.
No, you know what?
Right?
But it's funny, though, because what you just said, I continue saying a lot of people are saying right now, like, especially right now, we need to, but yeah, like, especially right now, though. Like, although the last 10 years has been like that, but there's always something, but I realize that this really is different right now.
Yeah.
Because, and it's been different, I don't mean just in 2025, it's been different the last 8 or 10 years, you know, and you just to throw in, and I don't discuss this stuff, but to throw in the political climate, how people hate each other on the other side. These are our, first of all, I'm not big on this is our country versus, I think of it as one human race, but if you just thought about this country for a moment, and like the hatred that has festered for the last bunch of years, that like if you are on the other side of this thing, we can't even be friends, like that's, I'm sorry, that's tough. That's a lot, man.
It's over the top. It's busting up families.
Yeah.
You know, I'm a big social media guy, and I pulled back because
I see you on there, but I see you
too much. It's a lot.
But you can get really hurt being in there too much.
You can, and I think you know I have this mindset that. Garbage in, garbage out.
Yeah.
And honestly, you know, we need to be really mindful about what we're consuming in our lives. And so if I face a day at work where I'm dealing with kids in our shelter and then, you know, attempted suicides among our children's mental health population and, you know, something else, and then I go home and watch cop shows where where there are shootings and stuff, I'm really cognizant of, you know, I'm building up
how much can you put in?
All of that, you know, all of that stuff. And so, you know, I look for, and I think, you know, a good balance is looking for that relief, looking for a way to escape from some of the craziness that's going on right now, some of the chaos that's going on. I think it's harder for folks in the not-for-profit space these days because there's a vulnerability. Right? Organizations are closing. Organizations are losing money. People are worried about their jobs. Most people in this sector, again, you don't enter the sector by accident, and there's a pretty good chance that you're not making a lot of money in all of this, and so you're living paycheck to paycheck at the same time you're caring for people who are barely living paycheck to paycheck, and now you feel vulnerable.
Yeah, it's organizations like yours, and I want to get back to Thrive because I think I took us off that topic, but it's organizations like yours that it's the people being served are often identical to the people that are serving them. The people that are serving are sometimes Medicaid recipients themselves, right? Or you know, or go to the pantry themselves. And I mentioned it on another episode of this program, and I talk about it a lot. It's an organization called Nest, which is a pantry on the campus of Nassau Community College, and I went to Nassau many, many years ago. And when I was there recently, they refer to, similar to the Interfaith Nutritional Network, they refer to the folks who come by as their guests and treat everybody with dignity. And you know, there's students there. There's some faculty who have some different needs. There was security professional on campus that came by as a guest, and you know, oftentimes, unfortunately, which is a whole nother discussion that I'd love to have with you, but the folks who work on the front lines in our types of organizations are not compensated well enough to survive, certainly on this island. You know, and which is wrong. It's inappropriate. I know you and others go up to Albany and discuss these topics, but it just continues to come up for me that the people who are being served are so closely connected to the people that are serving them.
And in some cases, they're closely connected, but I take a lot of pride at FCA that we hire folks, for example, in our Thrive program. Most of the folks that work in our program are in long-term recovery themselves. We have family peer advocates that work in our children's mental health program because they have the experience. And that experience is a blessing. I believe that the people who are closest to the problems are also closest to the solutions.
100%,
And the notion that a bunch of folks with fancy degrees go running around and know it all, it doesn't work that way. We have a violence prevention program in the village of Hempstead, right? For years, people who look, act, talk like me and have the same cop haircut walked around Hempstead saying, please don't shoot each other, don't shoot each other, don't shoot each other, we'll put you in jail. You know what that accomplished? Nothing.
What do you know, man?
But we've got credible messengers from the community that have grown up there throughout multiple generations, who maybe have past gang membership, who maybe have been involved.
Who knows better than someone who's been in that paradigm and through those?
Who can go in the community and say, look, dude, I did this. Like, this
doesn't go well. This is good.
It doesn't help you.
Two ways you're going to go, and neither one of them are good.
So we're creating job opportunities for folks who might have a hard time getting those jobs elsewhere, and they're credible messengers in our community.
I love that.
Turning around their life experience to help clean up what's happening in our communities. And so I'm a big believer, and that's always been like informally the case. Like when you talk to people, even people who work in finance or HR in the not-for-profit world, if you dig deep enough and you're like, so how come you chose this versus
you can go over there and do this.
Right, you could do this anywhere. You could do HR anywhere. You always find that there's a thing. My grandmother struggled and didn't have the help she needed, or have a kid that's on the spectrum, or there's always something that drives it. But hiring folks that's one of their job qualifications is a really, really good thing, because it enables them to be out there and be proud and say, I'm a person in long-term recovery. What does that do when we talk about unleashing stigma? That enables them to say, this is who I am. Right? And every time somebody stands up, it enables someone else to stand up. Like he stood up and said he was in recovery, and people clapped.
Every time somebody stands up, it enables somebody else to stand up. And so I haven't had a drink in 14 years, and I tell people that, and I don't tell people for the attaboy stuff, and I'm not in the program. I've never been in AA. I like Sinatra, I did it my way, but I did it my way, and I decided I take some of the program stuff, and I said, I'm going to go to sleep tonight before I have a drink. Now, I don't have to say that all these years later, but that was how it started, And I only bring it up just to say, I never really, for a long, long time, like 10 years, I didn't say, like, I'm in recovery, or I didn't really play it that way. And now, just like I tell everybody, not everybody, but anybody who wants to listen, that I see a therapist twice a week, and I have ADHD, I tell the people that I'm in recovery, because look at this guy, all the cool stuff this guy does. And not for the accolades, but for it's normal, right? Where so the peer advocate stuff, whether it be in the mental health space, whether it be in substance abuse disorder and recovery, who better? Who better? And to your point about, being in the village of Hempstead and guys that look like you and me are probably not the best guys to be able to tell that story, but people who have that lived experience can say, hey man, I did it, and it sucks. Don't do it, man. A friend of mine, and I think you might know Jeff McQueen over at Mental Health Association. He sat in that seat and has incredible stories to tell. And the day he came in and we had a discussion here in the studio, he was coming from the jails, because he goes into groups in the jails. And I said, I meant like scheduling wise. I said, how often do you get to do that? He goes, whenever they ask me, whenever they want me, I'm there. And like, that's the stuff, and to relate and say, man, I know where you are. I've been where you're at. Let's look at this another way.
He's a rock star. I've known him for a lot of years. He's fantastic.
Great man.
Look, I think we all as a society spend a lot of time in like surface talk that doesn't mean anything. It's not authentic, it's not genuine, it's BS. It's like the posturing on social media. And I always feel like when we share our life experience, we extend that invitation to another person to do the same. That's where real connection happens. Right? So the former Surgeon General did an entire report on the loss of connection, Vivek Murthy, and the loss of connection between communities. In suburbia, that happens times 10. So there's a guy named Robert Putnam who wrote a book probably 25 years ago called Bowling Alone. And it was about the decline in social capital in communities where we don't connect with each other anymore, particularly in suburbia. You drive, you commute to work in New York City, you come home, you're tired, you go to bed, you get up and you do the same thing again. And we don't really connect with the people around us, which means that we don't know them. The downside of not knowing them means that you're not that invested in them. So we're not all invested in our community in the same way together. And so I always look for ways to say, how can we create that connection between two people or a group of people that makes us all stronger?
How can we? How do you do that?
It's being honest and open about your life experience. It's talking about real stuff.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, and the biggest fear people have about some of this is, I'm not going to know the right thing to say.
Yeah.
You know, a good friend of mine lost her father recently, and I called her last night, and she's struggling, right? This was a very prominent figure in her life. And I said, you know, I don't know that I have the right words for you, but I want you to know that I hear you and that I'm here, right? And so people will say, I don't want to go down that road. I don't know what to say. I don't want to say the wrong thing.
But isn't it, you don't need to say, you need to listen.
That's right. You need to be there.
Yeah.
You need to listen.
Yeah.
And I always say to folks, if you're unsure as to what to say, it's okay to say that.
Yeah.
I'm not sure what to say right now that will make
but
this
I'm here
any better.
if you need
but
somebody.
I am here, right? Or I feel uncomfortable having this conversation, but I want to be there for you.
Right.
You know, and so the more we can open up and create those connections, I think the richer it's going to be. Look, and you do that too, right? So you call yourself the not-for-profit connector, right? When we started to come in here, you introduced me to the two women who were on before me, right? Yeah. And I learned a little bit about them and vice versa. So that kind of connection, of course, goes a long way, rather than just kind of passing in, hi, and coming in.
So I can't even have that. I can't even allow what you're that and I know you're not advising that, but I can't even allow people to be around without. You got to know each other. Like to me, it's like, for lack of a better way of saying it, it's obligatory, although that makes it sound a little negative. I love that, because like, had you not met the people who were here, then what? There's a lost opportunity. I can't deal with lost opportunities, man. I don't have time for that. Like, I believe my responsibility is like, I make people's paths cross that wouldn't have. Like, they might have been two parallel lines. I go, no, that's like that. And that is the connection. And neither one of us is old enough to go to the old country store with like, remember like the tumbleweeds rolling through the street and stuff like that. But that's what I feel like I look back, and that's community to me. And this is Long Island, so I think people probably think we are like that. And I have occasions where in the neighborhood, you know, all right, I got Johnny, we'll take Susie, no worries. And there's a lot of that in pockets. But I say, you know, this is not a big island. It's a long island, right? It's not big, but we're still not connected as much as I think we can be. And you said earlier, you talked about connection, and I appreciate the props on being the nonprofit sector connector and all that. But do you see more areas of opportunity where we can do that, whether it be in our organizations like yours, across the sector, or just across our island, about getting together?
A lot of our programs do that.
Tell me.
Right, so the peer program I mentioned to you that operates out of Thrive, all peers, all folks with lived experience, they actually report to hospital emergency rooms subsequent to an overdose and provide support to that person. And that person, you know, you look and say, oh, you just survived an overdose. I'm sure you want to go into treatment. For some people, that's true. For other people, they're like, no, I actually don't. This was a one-off. I don't want to do that, but I really need a place to stay tonight. Okay, good. We got you. Right? And if Thursday you want to go into treatment, we'll have a conversation again. Or they'll say, look, I've spent all my money, I need food. Okay, cool, we got you. And by building that trust and that relationship, it enables greater things to happen. We have a program called the Friendly Visitor Program, where we have retired seniors that go visit other seniors that are homebound.
That's great.
It's great because it's socializing. Maybe you go to a movie, maybe you do the crossword puzzle, you do something else, but it also provides us with the eyes and ears in the household. Right. I went to John's house this afternoon, and it was freezing. John might have a problem with his heat, or I happened to flip open the refrigerator, and there was nothing in there, or John appeared to be intoxicated at 2 p.m. Right. Maybe we should have a conversation and see if he's good. And so a lot of our programs are designed to do exactly that. How do we link people up and connect them in a way that matters? And if you think about the essence of case management, it's always it's only about that, right? It's the person who walks alongside you through that part of the journey, not in front of you, not behind you, but alongside of you, to make sure that you get what you need in the process. And I think out of that, So among our staff, I take a lot of pride. We've had people who worked for us for upwards of 40 years.
Yeah, unbelievable. Wow, that's great.
The relationships and bonds they all have with each other is uncanny. The relationship that some of our staff have with clients, and if you think about
Familial, right?
yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
But if you think about it for a second, if you're coming to FCA, it's likely the very worst time of your life. Right? It's generally, if you're a runaway and homeless kid, you're knocking on the door of our shelter at 2 a.m. in the morning.
Oh my God.
That's your lowest point. If you're using 20 bags of heroin a day and have suffered 3 non-fatal overdoses, it's your low point.
Yeah.
If you're a senior who worked all your life and lost your money in the stock market and are now looking at having to give up your home,
Pretty bad day.
this is the very worst point of your life. And someone willing to step up and share some of that pain with you only for a moment, emotionally as well as practically giving you assistance, that doesn't happen very often.
No.
Those are magical moments.
And those are magical people.
Yeah.
Those are magical people that
Yes.
work in this sector, that work in an organization like yours and so many other organizations. I want to ask you this, because through your lens, through your experience, the different places you've been, the people you meet, how do we end the stigma around mental health and that conversation that I want to have? How do we end that stigma?
Talk about it.
Talk about it.
Exactly what we're doing now.
Yeah.
So one of the things is, we talk about all sorts of things, right? I'm of the age where guys get together to talk about their prostate problems and everything else, like their backs, everything hurts. It drives me crazy. No one ever gets together and says, I'm feeling kind of depressed lately.
No, especially not men.
Feeling,
Especially not
right.
men.
I'm feeling kind of anxious lately.
Yeah.
They'll say I'm stressed, but that has to be like work related. I'm
Yeah.
stressed, work is crazy.
Right.
And then the conversation ends. As men, you think about some of the responses you give, and I wrote.
I'm fine, Jeff.
Right,
I'm fine.
Right. I wrote a blog post recently. A guy said to me, I said, "How you doing?" He's like, "Oh, just living the dream."
Yeah, I love that one.
And as a cancer survivor, quite frankly, I'm like, "Oh, I am."
Yeah, right.
And
Yeah,
I
you
get
really
it
mean
every
that.
day.
Yes.
But you know what? If you're just getting through the day, sooner or later you're just getting through weeks. Sooner or later you're just getting through months, and then years pass, and then you've lost those opportunities.
Yeah.
Let's
Where
talk
you could
about
have been,
what we're
you
feeling.
could have been thriving, not
That's
surviving.
right. That's exactly right.
Yeah.
It's not, I have to do this. It should be I get to.
I get to.
Right.
On the beginning, now as crazy as this is, and we'll close with this one, every day I get my 4 children off to school, which is challenging.
More
as heck.
power to you.
Yeah, I do the best I can. But I used to say, I got to get my kids to school. No, it says on my calendar from 6:30 to 8:15, which ends up at 8:45 by the time it's usually done. But it says I get to take my kids to school. I got one run. I got one shot at this thing, man, right? They're 15 down to 10. At some point, I'm not taking anybody to school or anything. They probably won't even want to hang out with me much anymore,
That's right.
So I get to have this conversation with you, right? I get to go out and meet new people, right? I got to, that sucks. I get to, it's an opportunity. And this has been a great opportunity. I appreciate what you're doing on Long Island. I appreciate what you're doing for this program and ending the stigma. And I really, truly appreciate what you do for your people, your staff. And leaders like you and the other leaders here we hang out with in the sector are so critically important because they give so much back and so much credit to the people. So thank you for being here. I appreciate you, man.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me on.
Thank you so much. You're welcome. Gang, you know it. It's hashtag ending the stigma together. I'm Tommy D, the nonprofit sector connector. We have questions. We're going to get some answers. We're going to make the world a better place together. This has been another In Focus production. I'll see you later on. Bye.